Yo, what's up guys? It's HDL, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Tails' flight mechanic. Out of the three characters, I think his aerial ability is probably the least understood, so I'm going to be going over all the nuances and pretty much everything you need to know about it here. We're going to be starting with the actual activation itself, so it's quite simple. You just jump and then push another jump button, or even the same one. It has to be a jump. You can't run off a ledge or roll off a ledge or something like that. You have to jump and then push the jump button, and he enters his flight mode. And you can see on the top left, once you enter flight mode, shows a little icon. That's the duration, so 480 frames. That's exactly 8 seconds. Once you exhaust that, Tails can no longer fly upwards. He just gets tired, and everything else about it is pretty much the same. He's just unable to fly. Next thing you'll notice is the icon. Every time I actually fly upwards, there's another icon, some blue arrows. That's flight boost. And it shows you how many frames he gains upwards momentum. In this case, it's 4 frames. So once the 4 frames are up, he stops gaining upward momentum, or at least upward external force, I guess you can call it. He still does move upwards, as you can see here. He just stops gaining extra force from the flight boost. One quick thing I want to mention about flight boost is that once you activate it, pushing another button does absolutely nothing. It does not make you go up any faster or any higher. As long as flight boost is kicked in, other additional inputs will do absolutely nothing. You have to wait until the flight boost actually ends, and then pushing another input. There you go. Pushing another input will influence it. I'll go a little bit more in depth a bit later on flight boost. There's another really important thing to touch on, but first I want to cover your actual speed with flight. So if you let's go to this side, it's easier to demonstrate. So if I'm just running and I reach my top speed, you'll see on the bottom left in the middle of the rectangle, it says 1536. That's pretty much the top speed you can get just from a straight run on flat ground. Same thing applies to flight. So if I do this, you'll notice 1536 is the maximum horizontal speed I can get. If you pay attention to my inputs, I'm stopping holding a direction. I'm holding no direction right now, and he's still maintaining 1536. You do not need to hold a direction to maintain your speed in flight mode. As long as you're not moving upwards, Tails will maintain whatever current speed you have. As long as, and also, of course, if you're not holding back. If you hold back, then obviously he'll begin to slow down and move in the other direction. So maintaining horizontal speed, pretty simple. Don't even have to be holding forward. But I would recommend holding forward, because once you activate flight boost and you start moving upwards, the flight does get subjected to a property called air drag. Now I'm going to be covering air drag much more in depth in a later video, but for now, basically, all you need to know is that as you near the apex of your upward movement, it will slow down your horizontal speed. That applies to jumping as well as Tails' flight. So we can actually mitigate this by using ceiling. Very much like, spin dashing and then jumping to bump a ceiling, we can use that concept with flight by just repeatedly flying into the ceiling and bumping into it. And what that does is it minimizes the amount of time that we're moving upward. So we still get air drag from it, but we're spending much more time moving horizontally than we are actually moving upward. And for that reason, you want to make sure that you fly very quickly. You don't want to delay the bumps on the ceiling because you're just spending more time in air drag, and it's much slower that way. However, you must be careful with pushing it too soon. If you push it too soon, Tails actually sticks to the ceiling and he slows down dramatically. On top of that, if you look at the flight boost frame count, it's actually misleading. You can see how it jumps back to 9 after having gone down to 6. Then it goes down to 7 and goes back to 9. So it's a little misleading there. Not that you'll see this timer in game, but it's just something to be aware of. If I keep flying, sticking close to the ceiling, you can see how slow this is. This is horrible. He's going at like 700 something when, normal top speed is 1536. So that's like less than half of the speed. So where can something like this come in handy? Well, actually right here. That is a shortcut that we used to use in the old route of this level. As you can see, it's just barely possible to make it to the other side. Um, if you do the quick bumps on the ceiling, you have a little bit of extra leeway. If you do the slow bumps, you can still make it, but it's a lot tighter. So that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say uh, for activation, the duration, and about your horizontal speed. Next, we're going to go to another level and touch up on the remainder of the flight boost. There's something quite important that you need to know about that. All right, so you might have noticed before that the actual flight boost duration was inconsistent. When I do it here, it says one value, and then when I use it again, it's a different value. Use it again, it's a different value still. So why is that? Well, the flight boost duration actually depends on your Y velocity or vertical speed. The faster you are falling down, the longer the duration will be. Um, this is because Tails kind of has to fight gravity with it, so he gains upward force, but gravity is, pulling him down. Um, However, there's a maximum duration of 30 frames. So if I jump down like that, and keep in mind, pushing jump button once in the air only activates flight. It does not trigger flight boost. You have to push a button again. So once you're falling down fast enough, you'll see it says 30 frames, and he gains no upward momentum whatsoever. He just falls down, flight boost, and he just slows his descent with it. Remember what I mentioned before about mashing inputs during flight boost doing absolutely nothing? Well, that applies here too. If I do this, any inputs that I use during the flight boost does nothing. It does absolutely nothing. So if you're one of those people that, you're trying to frantically gain height, it's obviously it's going to work eventually once the flight boost ends because you're just going to get another flight boost. Mashing is way better for actually continuously flying upwards, like as you can see at the top. If I just keep pianoing the buttons like that, I'll keep getting the 1 frame flight boosts. But going downward, it doesn't actually matter until the flight boost ends. Yeah, as you can see, I wasn't able to avoid landing on the platform. So over here, just a quick example of a way you can use this is just, time your jump here and then time your flight and your flight boost. You could just do a quick piano roll. I gotta get used to that emulator lag for these videos. But the idea is, you can just jump here and do that, and you'll actually just fly straight into the switch without, there we go. So you'll fly straight into the switch without gaining any upward momentum. And if you can do that, then you just completely avoid air drag altogether. So that's one way you can use Flight Boost and understand uh, how it works. Uh, as far as moving upwards, which is something you're going to do a lot, I recommend just pianoing the buttons back and forth really fast, like that. Um, I used to time it, like I used to go like this, and that works, but you can see the difference between timing it like that and just mashing it like that. I just repeatedly get flight boosts. It's just going to be a lot more consistent just by if you just repeatedly piano the buttons. The next thing I want to address is landing on top of sprites. So Tails can use his flight to just land on top of these. It's pretty self-explanatory. Instead of breaking them, you'll just land on them, and that can be useful in certain situations. Um, However, a property of landing on sprites as opposed to landing on solid ground is that if you release a direction, Tails will not break into his walk or run animations. So normally, if I just do this and I'm holding right, once I land on it, you can see he starts walking. But if I release a direction, he maintains his flight animation, and he actually continues to slide along the sprite, and then he'll fall off and he'll still be in his flight animation. Now, during this time, you can't actually use flight boost. As you can see on the bottom right, I was, trying different inputs. The game does consider him to be out of flight, but not entirely. So we can see this by sliding off a sprite that's actually a ledge. So right here, to my left, that ledge right there is considered a sprite object, so I can slide off of that. If I do this, now look at the bottom left, towards the middle. You'll see it says plus 112. That's actually a speed predictor. Um, as I use frame advance, you can see the numbers are actually increasing. Tails has not moved off the ledge yet, and yet his speed is increasing. This only happens when you use flight to slide off a platform. It does not happen if you're standing on it or if you're walking off the ledge. So once he actually falls off the ledge, he actually maintains the speed that he gained from being in his flight animation while sliding on the sprite. Now, another place you can use this is over here. If I do this, as I get close to the ledge, you can see it says plus 112, and it just increases. And then once he starts moving off the ledge, he actually maintains that speed. So how fast is this? Well, admittedly, it's not much faster than just running off. If you just run off the ledge, he won't start gaining speed until vertical speed until he's actually airborne. Tails, when you slide off with the flight, he'll gain speed a little before. I actually calculated the frames of landing right here from up there, and from just walking off, it was 103 frames until he landed here. With the slide, it was 98. So it's not really that much faster, but frames are frames, right? Gotta save the frames. All right, this one is really cool. This is a property of Tails' flight that is not very well known, and even amongst people who know about it, they may easily forget it or think it behaves inconsistently, but it's actually very simple. So he can actually deflect projectiles with his flight. So it's very simple. Projectile comes at you, boom, deflection. And what's cool is it actually deflects in like the direction, the opposite direction. So like if I do like that, it goes downward. It's really, really cool to look at. Um, just one thing I want to mention about this is that if you are in flight boost, see like right there, nothing's gonna happen. However, if I do this, I get hit. So a lot of people, they see, they're flying, they see the projectile coming at them, they're like, oh snap, they push a button and they get hit like that. Um, don't push the button, just let it rock. No rings, easy mode. Just let it rock and you'll be fine. So one quick thing, just as a little side thing, that you don't really need to know this, but since we're here, if you get onto this thing and you are in flight and you don't hold the direction, this happens. He just keeps like sliding along the ground. Just a little quirk of his flight. Good to know those things. Knowledge is power, right? Next thing I want to talk about is super flight. It's not a hidden mechanic or anything like that. It's just a clever way of using the flight activation. So if you recall when I said earlier that flight activation doesn't give you any additional force or speed, and it doesn't activate flight boost, it does, however, maintain a lot of your current momentum, and it also enables Tails to slow his descent so he can fight gravity with this. We can use this to our advantage by just timing a flight correctly as we're moving upwards. The problem is that while you're moving upwards, if you try and activate flight, it just doesn't work. At least not right away. You have to wait a little bit before it actually enables you to activate the flight mode. So why is this? All right, so let's take a look at our speed. So if you look at the bottom left again, you can see it says 1328. That's our current speed. Don't worry about the number below it. That's something else. Our current speed, upward speed, that is, obviously, as we go up, it's going to get slower and slower. If we try to push another button to activate flight here, nothing happens. So one frame later, 992. There, that's the point where it actually lets you activate the flight. And this is about halfway through the jump, so don't worry if you can't see these values in game. Just try and gauge roughly halfway through your jump. You'll be able to activate your flight. This will change depending on whether you're jumping from an angle or not. Remember, this game has slopes and angles that will affect your upward momentum. I'll be covering those in another video, of course, but for now we're just doing things on flat ground. So this will be the maximum height you can get from a super flight. You can see it's way higher than a normal jump. The usual method for getting a flight is to actually release jump and push the button again, like that, but you can see the actual height we get is much weaker. This is a much more consistent way of activating the flight. So if you don't need that much height, you just need a little bit to get over a ledge or a wall or something, then this is actually a really good way to do it. But if we need that height, we need to employ a more reliable method because this is not going to work. So what I like to do is use the magic of a piano roll. Very useful that this game has 3 jump buttons because it lets us use things like piano roll to get more consistent spin dashes, super flights, etc. So what I like to do is, and of course you can use whatever method is most comfortable for you, but For me, I like to use B to jump because it enables me to piano roll ABC very easily right after. So just a quick piano roll like that, and as long as you time it well, roughly halfway through the jump, it's going to give you a really good result. Even the second best height, which is on frame 2, that's still a really, really good height, and you almost can't tell the difference. One thing that I do want to mention is that you cannot activate flight boost right away. If you are moving upward with a certain amount of speed, flight boost will not take effect. That's really important to know because if a lot of people they'll do something like a super flight and then they'll mash the buttons thinking that they'll gain additional height. You don't gain any additional height until your upward speed falls below a certain value. So if we pay attention to the number again, it says 408 now. That number has to fall to roughly 256 before the game actually lets us trigger a flight boost. Again, you're not going to see these values in game, so you will have to just get used to, once you actually start to slow down enough, you get a feel for it, and then you can start mashing for your flight boosts. Okay, just keep that in mind. So, does this actually matter anywhere? Well, yes, actually, in some places it does matter. So, over here, we're going to just try and releasing jump and just repressing the button to try and get a flight. And as you can see, we can't make it onto that ledge up there. We actually can make it, but it's just, with this method, it's just significantly less likely to give you the height needed. But with a super flight, something like that is pretty trivial. That was actually the best one. So you can see in certain locations, if you just get that super flight, it's very easy to get the height you need. And of course, if you just do the re-jump and then just use flight boost, you can make it up there. It's not like you can't do that, but why do that when this is way more consistent and it's gonna get you up there sooner. Flight boost, remember, you have to be under a certain vertical speed in order to activate it. If you just do that, that's not going to work. You have to wait until near the apex of the flight, and then you can actually start to gain a little bit of height with the flight boosts. Again, with the actual execution method, it's going to depend on what type of controller you're using, keyboard, arcade stick, whatever. If you're using your thumb or multiple fingers to piano the buttons. This is just my method. It's just more comfortable for me to jump with B and then piano ABC to the right real quickly. So just experiment, find out what is more consistent and more comfortable for you. Please don't break your fingers. It's not worth it. And yeah, have fun with this one. This is a really, really cool technique to use with tails. It's also really difficult, so don't get too mad if you don't get it right away, and just keep at it. I really love this one. The last thing I want to cover is attacking. Attacking is pretty straightforward. You just fly into things from underneath, and as long as you have upward momentum, you'll hit them. You don't even need flight boost to do it. You can actually hit things while moving downward or horizontally, but the positioning is very precise and it's just not worth going for unless you're doing a task. Really quickly before I show that, I want to touch on swimming. Swimming is pretty similar to flight. The controls are exactly the same, but there are some key differences. So for one thing, you're subjected to underwater mechanics. I'll get to that in a later video, but for now, just know that being in the water cuts your speed in half. You can't really do things like super fly or anything like that. and you cannot attack anything while swimming. His tails are not spinning, so you can't attack. Tails needs his arms and legs to swim, so if you're holding Sonic, you'll just fall. You cannot swim Sonic upwards the way you can fly him upwards. If you're playing co-op with someone, just have the Sonic player jump repeatedly. As long as he jumps off of Tails, Tails can resume swimming and then catch him again, and you can just repeat the process to gain a lot of height. And that's pretty much all you need to know about swimming. Don't drown. So, enemy appears, whether it's a boss or a regular enemy, you can just fly into them from underneath, and you can hit them a bunch. This game does have a lot of physics properties, not accurate physics, but accurate enough that if I fly to him from moving left, I'll get bounced to the right. So you'll just get the opposite momentum from that. So keep that in mind. You can counteract it by holding forward. You'll get bounced backwards and then just have some forward force, and you'll be able to maintain control of the flight. If I try to do like fly into him like that, yeah, that's a bad idea. You can gain hits, but you can see flying into him. Yeah, see, so you can get hits like that. I'm just trying to show you that it's not worth going for. And boom, dead. So yeah, don't do that. There's really not much else to know about flight. Flight actually does have some quirky properties when interacting with certain sprites and objects in the game. So just to show you real quickly, you saw that when the bomb exploded underwater, it actually pushed them upward really fast. The reason it does that is because, remember, flight fights gravity really hard. It slows your descent, but while you're moving upward, if you remember with Superflight, gravity doesn't have as much of an effect on you. So if we go to, I forget which state it was, here we go. So if we go here, I think I may have used them already. Yeah, I used the ones here already. Uh, but yeah, that's one example. We go into that thing right there. Once we came out of here, we just maintained our upward momentum. And anything that gives you upward momentum, like these balloons, we actually use this for the speed run. Not these balloons, but some down below that I had exhausted previously. Um, so yeah, flight does have some quirky properties when you use it with certain objects and elements in the levels. So just play around, get used to those things. But for now, I'm gonna cut the video. That's pretty much all you need to know about Tails' flight. Once again, if you are confused about anything, feel free to reach out to me, and I will try to do my best to explain things further. Tails' flight is probably the main reason why I love using him. So once you understand how to use flight correctly, it's just way more fun. This character is so fun to use when you have everything down pat. So yeah, that's it guys. Enjoy.